Hi, and welcome back to this week's Parsha Shir on Sefer Tal Chermon. This week's Parsha, Vaera, Rav Aviner addresses himself to some of the broad themes of Sefer Shemot and really trying to explain how the Parsha that we will read this Shabbat in terms of the Makot and Tzia Mitzrayim and the Geula, the redemption that's in the process of occurring, really fits into a larger context, and how the stories that lead up to it actually set the stage for it and also set the stage for what is to come later in Jewish history and our whole understanding of the way these events transpire. He says, Sefer Shemot Kulo Metaer Ta'alich HaYetzirah Shel Am Yisrael Shlav Achar Shlav. Really, the whole purpose of Sefer Shemot is to describe the construction, evolution of the Jewish people, the creation of the Jewish people step after step. Yitziat Mitzrayim derech Matan Torah ad lahashrat hashchina. From Yitziat Mitzrayim to the receiving of the Torah to the Mishkan and the dwelling of God amongst us. HaParsha Rishona b'Sefer Oseket behit rak muto shel Am Yisrael b'toch kur habarzel shel Mitzrayim. The first parsha is how we were created in the kiln, or in the fires, or in the smelting pot of Egypt. Sham anu nepachim derech hashibud ve'amabach mimishpacha la'am. It's there as we were refined in the furnaces of Egypt from a family into a nation. V'ilu parshatenu hashniya. Now in our parsha Vaera, the second parsha in Sefer Shemot, oseket b'talich ha'havdalah v'ha'aflaya shel Am Yisrael mitotmot Mitzrayim. And now we have to separate slowly from the impurities of Egypt. So in the first parsha, we were emerging or transforming from a family to a nation in the midst of Egypt. Now it's time to start to separate out from Egypt and distinguish ourselves as a nation. Havdalah zo nasa bezrat shnei tipulim elokiyim hamakod vehodat shem Hashem. This process of separation was aided by two things, two godly interventions: the Makot, the plagues that come upon Egypt, separating us from Egypt and distinguishing us, and the recognition of the name of God, which comes closer and closer and further into Mitzrayim as the Parsha goes on, further separating us as the people of God and the different God than the gods of Mitzrayim, etc. He says, L'makot Mitzrayim yeshlan shnei matarot shehen achad. There are actually two purposes to the plagues in Egypt, which really come together for one goal. Hatachlit hama'asit shel akad Mitzrayim yishiluach b'nei Yisrael me'artzam. The very practical goal of the makot, of the plagues in Egypt, was to allow b'nei Yisrael to be released from the bondage of Egypt, to be set free. Hatachlit hashniya haruchanit, the second, less practical and more spiritual goal of the Makot was derech hamakot holech v'nivdal ha'am ha'Israeli me'ha'am ha'Mitzri. Secondly, was to distinguish us on a spiritual plane from the Egyptians. V'hifleti be'yamahu deretz Goshen asher ami omed aleha l'voti hayot sham. The whole purpose, the pasuk says, of the Makot was to separate us out in the land of Goshen. Laman tidaki ani Hashem b'keref haaretz. Everyone will know that I am the God in the midst of the land. Samti padut ben ami ben amecha. Over and over, the Torah reiterates the fact that the goal of the Makot is to separate between us. So that's a spiritual goal, to start to move us away from the Tumah of Egypt. V'hifla Hashem b'miknei Yisrael, b'miknei Mitzrayim. Even our cattle will be separated. Mitoch havdalah zoh holechad mitgabeshet l'maaseh v'toda'at ha'olam v'ha'am ha'havaya halomit ha'Yisraelit hanifredet. Because of these small acts of separation, which come and are concretized more and more, in reality and in the recognition of the world and the recognition of ourselves, we become a distinct nation. We become a separate people. But we have to understand that even though we understand very clearly that that's the goal of the Makot, there was a preamble to all of those Makot. There was a preamble to the process of separating between us and the Egyptians that had to come first. And that happens with another Makkah, another hit, another plague, so to speak, not the Makot of the 10 Makot which Hashem sends down to Egypt, but the Makkah that Moshe Rabbeinu places upon the Egyptian. It says in last week's Parsha, Vayar ish Mitzri makeh ish ivri me'achav vayachet ha-Mitzri vayetmineu b'chol. Moshe Rabbeinu, after Vayigdal, after he grows up, he goes out to look at his brethren who were slaves in Egypt, and he sees an Egyptian man hitting a Jewish man, ish Mitzri hitting an ish ivri. And he goes over and he kills him and he buries him in the sand. What we have here in this Makkah is not just the final, practical point, which is that Egyptian is killed, Hamaka ba mitoch hakara ben ish mitzri leben ish ivri. There's something greater going on here in this smiting of the Egyptian by Moshe, and that is the differentiating or the separating between Ish Mitzri and Ish Ivri. That's the whole preamble of the story. Before Moshe hits the Mitzri, it's not just taking care of someone who's being cruel to a Jew, but there's some preamble which sets it up as a paradigm. There's an Ish Mitzri and an Ish Ivri, and Moshe comes to distinguish between them and to separate the fight, to create a distance between them. Mitcholelet kan hitnagshut ben shnei mahuyot menugadot. There is something happening here where two opposite existences, two opposite realities are being separated. Hamahut ha'ivrit v'hamahut ha'mitzrit. The Egyptian reality and the Jewish reality. Moshe makir et shtei hamahuyot ha'ela. Moshe, more than anybody, understands these two realities. Michad hu ivri, u'miyidach hu gadal bebeit paro 40 shana. On the one hand, he's an Ivri, he understands that intuitively, he understands that emotionally, but also he's Egyptian. He grew up 40 years in the palace of Paro. He understands both sides of the coin. He understands how right now, meaning in last week's Parsha, at that moment, those two realities were so intertwined, they were so close, both to the outside observer and to Bnei Israel themselves and to Hashem, right? The Medrash says that they were almost no different from the Egyptians. They had sung to Memtet Shari Tuma. They were almost indistinguishable from the Egyptians, really. So even from Hashem's view, the two realities were intimately intertwined, and they both came to the fore in Moshe Rabbeinu's own character, as he is really the epitome of both combined. Hu makir benigud ha-tehumi ben shtei hamaliyot. But because they're both part of his reality, he sees that even though practically they're very intertwined, in terms of the theory of each of them, in terms of the goals of each of them, in terms of the reality of each of them, they couldn't be more different one from the next. There's a gulf that existed between those two realities. V'hu machriya kan hachra'a cosmologit. When he goes and he hits the Egyptian and he separates the fight, he separates between Ish Mitzri and Ish Ivri. He's not just taking care of a practical matter, saving the life of the Jew. He's commenting and creating a hachra, a decision that is cosmological, that affects the rest of Jewish history. Hine kama v'notzeret mahut ivrit le'umit she'ena yechola ladur b'kfifa achat im hamahut hamitzri. He decides that a Jewish nation is rising in the midst that can no longer be linked to the Egyptian reality, that can no longer live as subservient to the Egyptian reality, but the time has come for it to be born into its own right, for it to become separated from the Egyptian reality, for it to become its own independent entity. It's time for the reality of the Jewish nation to actually become concretized in reality, to come to fruition. And the way to get there is to overcome the powers that are subjugating it, to overcome the powers that are pushing it down and preventing it from being born and from flourishing and from actualizing in the world. And it's because of that he hits the Egyptian. The first makkah, so to speak, not the 10 makkahs of Hashem, but the first makkah of Moshe is the initial step of the separation of the Jews and the Egyptians into two distinct realities that could no longer coexist, that could no longer be intertwined. It's the first step of the birth of the Jewish nation, and that first step happens by separating us out from the Egyptians, creating two different realities. Kan rak inyan shel mecha shel rishut pratit. Ein kan rak inyan shel mecha al rishut pratit shel ish mitzri. This was not just a makkah. This was not just a protest against the cruelty of one individual Egyptian against one individual Jew. Hamakah l'mitzri mitbatat atitnagshut habilti mitparsheret ben ish ivri leben ish mitzrim ein tkuva lahakaad kain hevel. It's the makkah of Moshe is a hachra. It's a decision not just to take care of an individual problem, but a national problem, to separate out these two realities. And he says, you see the difference. Moshe's reaction to the two Jews fighting. Gam b'Yisrael yesh rishayim. Sometimes they're bad people amongst the Jews. He says, Vayetze bayom hashini v'hinei shnei anashim ivrim nitzim. He sees two Jews fighting the next day. Vayomer l'rasha lama takeh re'echa. He just says to the Jew, why are you hitting your friend? He doesn't go and give him makkah. He doesn't go and separate them out. He doesn't go and distinguish those two realities, because two realities of an Ish Ivri and an Ish Ivri, they go together. They go hand in hand. They're bound up together forever. You can't separate that reality. So he talks to them. He tries to take care of the fight, tries to prevent the other one from getting hurt. That's how he takes care of an individualized problem. But the contrast is to Ish Mitzri and Ish Ivri. When he goes into that reality, he doesn't just talk them down off the fence. He doesn't just put himself in between and say, okay, guys, stop fighting, go back to your work. He doesn't want them to be together at all. He's Makeh Ish Mitzri. He gives the final blow of the separation of that quintessential paradigmatic Ish Mitzri and Ish Ivri. Now, what does all this result in? Moshe's Makkah, his initial step to separate between Am Yisrael and Am Mitzrayim, mitoch itaruta de latata shel Makkah zo, ba'acharkach itaruta de le'ela shel Makot Mitzrayim. It's only because of this Makkah, which happens from below, the stirrings of below in the language of the Zohar, in the language of the Arizal, we have to take human initiative to separate, and only then, in the next Parsha, meaning our Parsha, Vaera, do the Makos of Hashem start to come from above, with the express goal of doing exactly the same thing, separating out between the Egyptians and the Jews, between Am Yisrael and Am Mitzrayim. But that couldn't have happened without the preamble in Parshat Shemot of Moshe Rabbeinu, from a human perspective, taking that action to separate out the two. Eser makot shemuchpalot achar kach be'od eser makot she'al hayam, the 10 makot in Egypt, which are then compounded in the 10 makot on the sea. Kasher mispar eser balatzayin shlimuta kolelat kol hapratim, 10 represents the final completion of all the details coming together. The details that come together in the 10 and the 10 are Hamitzrayim mukim bechol sugei makot efshur. The Egyptians are totally decimated through every means possible. Derech hamakot ela mitbareret knisat Am Yisrael atoch historia enoshit. Through these makot of Hashem, which were really initiated by the Makkah of Moshe in last week's Parsha, suddenly the entry of the Jewish people into human history becomes clarified. It's their moment of birth onto the national historical stage. See many very important things here. The whole goal of Makot in general is to separate. The whole goal of this stage of Sefer Shemot is to create a national entity called the Jews, and to do that we have to separate out from the reality we're in, that's the Egyptian reality. But for that to happen, we had to give the human spark, for Hashem then to come and reciprocate and give the godly spark, which brings the process to its fruition. It's a very important model for us to think about as we think about our involvement in the world in general. We're definitely part of the world, we're connected to the world, but we're also distinct from the world, and that's what makes us a nation, that's what makes us different, that's what makes us our own reality. The minute we forget that, then we become part of the world at large and we lose our national identity. That's the whole problem with assimilation today. We can be involved in society, but we also have to be separate. If we lose that separation, which was created here in the furnace of Egypt, then we lose our whole national identity, our whole purpose in the world, and our whole identity as Jews and as the Am Hashem. But the process of separation is something God can help with, God can create in a certain way, but it has to be sparked by us. It has to have our own interest to become a nation, to separate from our reality, and then God can help us to get the rest of the way there. Now, we always know the balance of being part of the world, and part of the nations, and part of society, and part of culture, as well as the flip side of it, of knowing when to be separate and when to put up our barriers so that we maintain our own national distinctive identity, the identity that makes us who we are, makes us the Am Hashem, makes us connected to the Torah, and makes us the nation that will ultimately carry the spirit of Hashem into the world long into the future. Shabbat Shalom.